Anjum's here with us. Good morning. First time on Breakfast, certainly with me. You want to tell me about 300,000 kids who didn't go to school?
So the research that we've just been made aware of has shown that 300,000 children estimated have not been in the education system in the year 2023. And this is a 40% increase from 2017. So these are startling figures. And we're talking about children aged between 5 and 15. And 1/5 of those children who are not in the education sector are leaving in year 10. So when they're about to start their GCSE course, a really critical time in their education journey, there seems to be a fifth. So nearly 20% of children are exiting the education sector. And the worry is that we're not sure what's happening with those children, how they're falling through these cracks in the system.
COVID, wasn't it? And then they just haven't gone back to school.
There's an element of that, but there's also children who are now saying that, you know, they're struggling with school and the setting and their needs are not being met. We know that there's a SEND issue that we've been talking about. There's a backlog of children being diagnosed appropriately and their needs being met. But there's a really big number of children who are being homeschooled. So parents have made a very conscious decision to withdraw their children from formal education in the state sector and have decided to take that responsibility upon themselves to formally educate them. And that has doubled in numbers since 2017. So there's a real decision there that parents are making to opt out of what we would call formal education.
Our next story is from Belgium. It has approved a new labour law for its sex workers. It gives them a lot of employment rights. They have access to health care now. They can take maternity leave and they will get pensions. They can terminate their contract anytime they want. They can refuse sexual acts. This law is a first in the world, the first of its kind. It sets a precedent for other countries. In 78 nations across the globe, sex work is legal or partially legal, yet there are no protections for these people. Will this new law by Belgium change that? Our next report tells you.
It's a first in the world. Belgium has approved new laws for its sex workers. It will give them health insurance, pensions, family benefits, holidays, and more importantly, maternity leave. Essentially, rights that are equal to any other job in the world. In 2022, Belgium became the first country to decriminalize self-employed sex work. It was prompted by mass protests. The COVID-19 pandemic left sex workers without jobs and they were struggling for state support. Belgium has now moved to change that. The law went into effect on Sunday. It gives sex workers employment contracts and the perks that come with it. Not just that, sex workers can now refuse any client. They can also refuse any sexual act. They can also interrupt a sexual act at any time without fear of dismissal or punishment. And the onus now falls on employers. They must ensure the premises are clean. Rooms are equipped with panic buttons and there is access to showers and condoms. If the workers are not comfortable, they can press the panic button. Any employer convicted of a serious crime cannot employ any sex worker.
I think the benefits of the new law now are that it is easier to get a loan from the bank. It is also easier to get insurance and pension. That will be better for us. And if you are sick, you will also get an allowance.
Plus, the employment benefits are not tied to contracts. If a worker wants to leave the job, they can do so. They will still receive benefits like health insurance and unemployment benefits. This is a crucial step towards their economic freedom. All of this is also anonymous. That way they can apply to any other job without the fear of discrimination. Prostitution is legal or partially legal in 78 countries across the globe like Germany, Greece, the Netherlands and Turkey. There are millions of sex workers globally. But when it comes to protections, there are few. Legalizing prostitution was about making it safe. It was about giving workers access to healthcare and access to equal rights. Instead, it turned into a massive industry, one that generates millions in taxes but does little for the workers. And this is the case in places where it's legal. So imagine what it's like in countries where it's not legal. Sex work exists there too, except it escapes legal scrutiny. Governments turn a blind eye, and paying the price are millions of workers. It leaves them susceptible to violence and exploitation with no access to safety or support. Belgium wants to change that with this new law, and it's setting a global precedent. Sex work exists in every corner of the world despite stigmas and legal barriers. This new law challenges the stereotypes and acknowledges a simple truth. Sex work is work, and sex workers deserve the same rights as any other worker. Fair wages, safe conditions, and protection from harassment. By granting these rights, Belgium takes a bold step towards equality, regardless of the moral judgments that people may have.
In a revolutionary move, Belgian sex workers are now able to sign formal employment contracts and gain labour rights on par with other professions. The new law also establishes fundamental rights for sex workers, including the right to refuse clients, choose their practices and stop an act at any moment.
Ik vind dan de voordelen van de nieuwe wet nu zijn dat je gemakkelijker leningen kunt aangaan bij de bank, naar verzekeringen toe ook gemakkelijker kunt verkrijgen en dan het pensioen ook, dat ook voor ons beter gaat zijn. En als je ziek bent ook, dat wij dan ook onze uitkering kunnen krijgen.
Hoping to clamp down on abuse and exploitation within the industry, the law means sex workers will now have access to health insurance, paid leave, maternity benefits, unemployment supports and pensions.
Mijn grootste angst is eigenlijk dat de dames sneller gaan thuis zijn, dus sneller afwezigheid gaan melden, terwijl ze eigenlijk niet echt iets hebben. Dat weten we natuurlijk niet, kunnen we nooit niet zeggen. Ik weet dat in alle sectoren gebeurt, ik weet dat, maar ik hoop dat dat hier niet het geval gaat zijn. Ja, dat hoop ik.
Though some countries like Germany or the Netherlands have legalised sex work, none have implemented labour protections as comprehensive as Belgium.
A new update from the IDF that the IDF has informed the families of 6 abductees who were murdered. We knew that they were killed in captivity, that they were killed as a result of being executed by their captors. The abductees, Haim Perry, Yoram Metzner, Nadav Papaval, Yagav Bushtab, Alex Danzig, and Abraham Monder, that there was a IDF airstrike back on February 14th of this year in the Hamad neighborhood. I'll have to look at a map, but I believe that is in southern Gaza. And that as a result of this IDF airstrike, those 6 hostages were then executed by Hamas terrorists. Hamas had previously been claiming that they had been
killed in the airstrike.
Yes, that's right. Or as a result of some of the gas or fire that had was kicked off by that airstrike there. But their bodies have been returned to Israel. And again, this is just coming to me. This is fresh to me, so I cannot remember exactly. And maybe one of you do.
This is just, the thought to listen, this was part of the whole narrative that spread when this whole thing happened in the first place. Hamas saying, okay, this is a result of Israel and that we caused this. So now, the fact that this is coming out now, all of this time later, I guess, no surprise that.
This is awful. Gunshots found in their bodies. I cannot remember. Okay. Here we go. On the August 20th, during an IDF operation, those 6 bodies were returned and recovered. And it was only now that the families have been told that they had found signs that they had been executed.
We have some breaking news. CNN has obtained new surveillance video from the fatal shooting of the United Healthcare CEO. And we do want to warn you that the video is, of course, disturbing.
CNN Bryn Gingras joins us. Bryn, take us through this video.
Yeah, Phil and Brianna. So we are only showing a few seconds of this video that CNN obtained, obviously, because it is very alarming to watch. Essentially, what we see in that video is the CEO, United Healthcare, Brian Thompson, walking toward the hotel here behind me, and behind him comes the suspected gunman that police are still searching for. So you could see how he approaches Thompson from the back. Before then, where we freeze the video, he fires those shots at Thompson. What you do not see from these 5 seconds, and I can tell you, is that we also see someone sort of running the opposite direction. So that is something, of course, that police are going to be looking into in this video, breaking it down frame by frame by frame to kind of figure out who might have witnessed this. They, of course, are going to want to talk to anyone who might have witnessed this. Again, it happened at the really front step of this entrance of this hotel, so there's possible some security there as well. And then, of course, follow the path of that gunman. As we already have learned, he flees from the scene, going down a back alley behind a theater that's across the street from the hotel where we are, and then hops on a bike where they basically lose his trail in Central Park. So again, we know that police are offering a $10,000 reward for any information that's going to help find this suspected gunman, but that manhunt is underway after this brazen shooting in Midtown Manhattan, guys.
All right, Bryn, if you can stand by for us, I want to bring in CNN security correspondent Josh Campbell. Josh, what stands out to you in this video?
Well, all indications is this looks like a professional hit job. You look at all the characteristics that we've seen from essentially lying in wait for the CEO to walk by. We can see on that video that Brent obtained there that he essentially is behind a Suburban, the shooter, and as the CEO walks past, you see him then step out, the gun comes up on target, and he begins to fire. There is a level of sophistication that we can tell from the shooter from that video as well, and that is because as he's firing, we know that he used a suppressor on that gun. That's to muffle the sound. That is something that someone would use, obviously, if they don't want to draw attention to a particular shooting. And you see him, racking the slide of that gun, which typically happens on its own with a semi-automatic 9mm style gun. But when you have that suppressor there at the end, if you don't have perhaps the proper parts or it's not properly lubricated, that gun won't cycle. And so you see him essentially racking the slide for every round that he fires. And then also at one point, and this is what police had indicated as well before we obtained this video, that the gun had malfunctioned at one point, and you actually see him doing a clearing drill on that gun. And this is something that those of us who worked in law enforcement practice on over and over, where you essentially have these so-called immediate action drills where they practice for a round not to fire. Either it can get dislodged, there could be a double feed of ammunition, but in this case the shooter quickly racks it, the slide gets it back up on target, continues to fire, and then finally he makes his way of escape. So he not only came there, obviously very stealthy, but he still has not been found. Reports are that he fled on a e-bicycle, which obviously within the city of New York, a place where you have tons of license plate readers that a vehicle could perhaps be picked up on. Instead, this person chose to use a bicycle, which is obviously provides a more agile means of escape there. And so again, a lot of characteristics here that show this is someone who clearly was operating with some level of sophistication. Of course, now the big question comes down to motivation. That's work that's going on behind the scenes right now as well by authorities.
Bryn, what we saw in that video has been described. To actually watch it is just absolutely chilling. When you talk to your sources within the NYPD law enforcement right now, what's their sense of things in terms of how the manhunt's playing out, what resources they're actually utilizing, when they may actually find the suspect?
Yeah, I mean, every resource is being utilized at this moment, Phil. Certainly this has been, we're now about 6 or 7 hours into this investigation, and this is a major manhunt. And it does appear, of course, they came out right out of the gates saying we have a $10,000 reward, Crime Stoppers. Here are pictures of this suspect at the scene here and also on the bike. We need your help. So certainly they are trying to get this wrapped up as soon as possible and find this suspect. But certainly they point to the suspect, and they made it very clear in that news conference that we heard earlier today by the NYPD that this was a targeted attack. And everything I've heard from sources, and as Josh has sort of underscored, is that this person knew what they were doing. They seem to be sophisticated with the fact that they had that silencer. Some sources have told me they haven't seen a silencer on a handgun like that in forever, like calling it almost like a mob hit. So it's pretty startling to not only us as people who are, in just the normal people, but also to law enforcement, wondering who this person is with this level of sophistication.
Yeah, it was striking in the news conference how unequivocal they were that this was planned. Now you see why. Bryn Gingras, Josh Campbell, thanks so much.
Tragic story to tell you about tonight. It's in Rancho Cucamonga. A 2-year-old boy accidentally shot to death by his 7-year-old brother.
Incident happened yesterday afternoon in the parking lot of a Flora and Decor store on Day Creek Boulevard. Eyewitness News reporter Ateticia Juarez has the latest.
A routine errand turned into a tragedy at this Rancho Cucamonga parking lot, when a toddler from Crestline was accidentally shot and killed.
So mom had just gotten to the location and she was unloading some items that she was going to take inside the store. And while she was outside of the truck, the shooting occurred.
San Bernardino County Sheriff's investigators say that the gun was in the hands of the boy's older brother when the tragedy unfolded.
The 2-year-old was sitting in the cab of the truck along with his 7-year-old brother. The 7-year-old brother found a firearm in the glove box, and as a result of that find, the fatal shooting occurred.
The incident happened yesterday, shortly before 4 in the afternoon in the parking lot of the Floor & Decor. Despite life-saving measures, the child was pronounced dead at a nearby hospital.
I would encourage all parents to just take these things seriously. I know that gun safety is a huge responsibility, but it's also a moral obligation that we have to our children.
It's a tragedy that sadly is all too common. In 2024 alone, there have been 234 unintentional shootings by children, leading to 89 deaths and 151 injuries nationwide, according to Everytown for Gun Safety. More often than not, the victims are not strangers, but siblings, cousins, or close friends.
We have a lot more work still to do to get the message out, that every gun in every car, in every room, in every home needs to be securely stored.
The nonprofit Gun Safety Advocacy Group says the majority of these incidents involve handguns. They are small, accessible, and are often overlooked. And while California has strong gun storage laws that have helped to reduce unintentional shootings, there is still more work to be done.
Most of these tragedies are absolutely preventable.
The Sheriff's Department says they are still investigating and will forward their findings to the District Attorney's Office to determine if charges will be filed against the parents.
The United States continues to be the world's largest provider of humanitarian aid and development assistance. And that's going to increase. That's the right thing for the wealthiest nation in the world to do. And today, I'm announcing over $1 billion in new humanitarian support for Africans displaced from homes by historic droughts and food insecurity. The partnership between Angola and the United States also extends to supporting peace and security in this region and beyond. President Lorenzo, I want to thank him for his leadership in mediation in regional conflicts. I also want to thank him for Angola's speaking out against Russia's unprovoked war against Ukraine. It matters. It matters when leaders speak out.
Цели номер 1. Корабль в точке. Пуск. Пуск. Есть пуск. Крышка открыта. Глубину 40 метров. Есть, держать глубину 40 метров. Лодку на глубине 40 метров, под мотор вперед малый, с дифферентом 0. Залп! Есть залп!
We begin in the Middle East. The U.S. Air Force carried out airstrikes in eastern Syria on Tuesday night. A-10 Thunderbolt ground attack aircraft, which are deployed in Syria, bombed militants that were preparing to launch large-scale attacks on American troops. Washington has called the airstrike self-defense as jets swept into action to defend American ground forces.
This morning, U.S. Central Command forces successfully destroyed several weapon systems in the vicinity of military support site Euphrates in Syria that included 3 truck-mounted multiple rocket launchers, a T-64 tank, and mortars that presented a clear and imminent threat to U.S. and coalition forces. The self-defense strike occurred after the mobile multiple rocket launchers fired rockets that landed in the vicinity of MSS Euphrates, and mortars were fired towards U.S. forces.
Now, there are about 900 American troops deployed in eastern Syria who are instrumental in tracking the movements of terror groups in the region. And ever since the anti-government rebels swept through western Syria, the U.S. troops in the east have come under heavy fire.
We're still assessing who is operating these weapons, but do know that there are Iranian-backed militia groups in the area that have conducted attacks on MSS Euphrates in the past. There are also Syrian military forces that operate in the area. To be clear, these self-defense actions successfully eliminated imminent threats to U.S. personnel and were not linked to any broader activities in northwest Syria by other groups.
Meanwhile, anti-government Islamist rebels are now on the outskirts of the central city of Hama after having already captured Idlib and Aleppo. If Hama fails, the rebel forces will then be just about 100 miles away from the capital, Damascus, where Syrian's leader Bashar al-Assad is fortifying his presidential palace.
It's our homeland. We're living in our homeland, on our land, in our country. We won't leave. That's all. Whatever happens, we won't leave.
Syria, our troops, our young people, they're what's right. But the rebels are all strangers who want to control the country. It's clear what they want. They want to steal, to loot. They want everything. That's not a war. It's a war of thieves.
Meanwhile, the United States and Russia accused each other for the chaos in Syria, with Washington blaming Moscow for supporting terrorism in the region.
The fact that HTS is listed as a terrorist organization by the U.S. and UN does not justify the further atrocities by the Assad regime and its Russian backers. Since November 27, these have included attacks by the regime and its Russian backers on schools and hospitals in both Idlib and Aleppo, causing civilian casualties.
You have been asserting that the attacks against Syria were perpetrated by certain rebels whom, in your nefarious picture of the world, the terrorists and extremists transform into attacking those countries who are carrying out independent policy that does not advance the interests of the United States, policies that do not advance U.S. interests. You did not even notice how you betrayed yourselves, having promised to protect not the lives of ordinary civilians, but just those of U.S. troops who are illegally occupying certain areas of Syria and who are unconscionably looting the resources of that country.
Now, the United States has had a military presence in Syria since 2014 when it entered the region to defeat ISIS. 5 years later, in 2019, Washington defeated the terror network in Syria, but has maintained a sizable troop contingent in the country's east to prevent ISIS from ever returning.
Russia claims to have launched hypersonic missiles during naval and air force drills in the eastern Mediterranean. In fact, the drills coinciding with its ally Syria losing ground to rebels. The Russian military stated that the number of troops stationed in the region had been increased to support the exercises. In recent days, Russia has carried out airstrikes to counter a rebel offensive, remember, that has caused the Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's forces to lose control of Aleppo, Syria's second largest city. Moscow has been a crucial ally to Assad since the Syrian war started in 2011. Russia's defense ministry, in a telegram post, said that the precision sea-based missiles were launched in the eastern part of the Mediterranean Sea on December 3rd during an exercise to test the combined activities of the Russian Navy and the Air Force troop groups. The drills involved the test firing of hypersonic Zircon missiles and a Caliber cruise missile from Russian vessels, as well as an Onyx cruise missile launched from a designated area on the Mediterranean coast. Russia has a naval base in Syria at Tartus, but the statement did not mention where the drills were carried out. Moscow claimed that the exercise involved over 1,000 troops, 10 ships, 24 aircraft. The ministry published images showing the launch of several missiles from ships and land, and images of a target in open water being hit and exploding.
Meanwhile, a tense confrontation erupted between Russia and the US at the UN Security Council meeting on Tuesday, with both the nations trading accusations of supporting terrorism amidst the escalating fighting in Syria. While the conflict in Syria intensified following the capture of Aleppo by Syrian rebels led by the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham group, which is sanctioned by the UN Security Council. Deputy U.S. Ambassador Robert Wood urged for a de-escalation of the conflict and protection of civilians, while also criticizing Russia's involvement in the Syrian conflict.
The fact that HTS is listed as a terrorist organization by the U.S. and UN does not justify the further atrocities by the Assad regime and its Russian backers. Since November 27, these have included attacks by the regime and its Russian backers on schools and hospitals in both Idlib and Aleppo, causing civilian casualties.
Russia's UN envoy, Vasily Nemenzia, fired back accusing the U.S. of failing to condemn terrorist attacks on Syrian civilians and questioning Washington's commitment to combating international terrorism.
You were unable to summon the courage to condemn a clear terrorist attack undertaken against peaceful civilians in peaceful Syrian cities who were laboriously seeking to establish peaceful life despite the hundreds of illegal unilateral sanctions imposed by your country.
This was countered by Robert Wood, who stated that Russia was not in a position to lecture on terrorism, given its support for regimes that sponsor terrorism worldwide.
He is in no position to accuse the United States of supporting terrorist groups. The United States has for decades fought the scourge of terrorism and will continue to fight that scourge of terrorism. So the representative from the Russian Federation is in no position to lecture us on this issue, particularly when it props up regimes that sponsor terrorism around the world.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you very much for your hospitality. Fellow leaders and friends, I can't think of a better way to end my trip to Angola than coming here to Oviedo Carter. And I want to thank all of you for being here today, including the President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Zambia, Tanzania, and our partner, the CEO of the American Finance Corporation. It's great to be here with all of you. I mean that sincerely. I think we're at one of those transition points in world history. What we do in the next several years is going to affect what the next 6, 7, 8 decades looks like. And I think this is one of those milestones. Our partner, the CEO of the American Finance Corporation, will take care of everything for us. Nothing to worry about. But all kidding aside, it's great to be with you all. When I launched this project with our G7 partners last year, I said our goal was to build a better future. Folks, the future is here. It's now. The future is here. The fact is, I wish everyone could see what I saw today. Tracks that will form Africa's first intercontinental railroad, transcontinental railroad. A rail car that will cut travel from days to hours, and the grain silos that are going to help transform a region from food importers to food exporters. Businesses that are investing across the corridor in 5G, solar panels, steel bridges, made near my hometown back in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And I want to be clear about something. All these projects and investments are designed to have high impact and meet the highest standards for workers, for the environment, for their communities. Because the United States understands how we invest in Africa is just as important as how much we invest in Africa. That's what the PGI is part of. I started a program early on called Build Back Better. We changed it to PGI. And that's why today I'm proud to announce the United States will invest nearly $600 million in judicial investments to expand agriculture infrastructure, to build high-speed mobile networks, and to continue upgrading the Oviedo Atlantic Railway. A few months ago, the DRC sent the first copper shipment on this railway for transit onward to the United States. The trip used to take 45 days to get to the United States. But now it takes less than 45 hours. 45 hours, because it changed. It's a game changer. Imagine how transformative this will be for technology, clean energy, for farming, for food security as a whole. It's faster, it's cleaner, it's cheaper, and most importantly, I think it's just plain common sense. So my message today is simple. Let's keep it up. All told, the United States has invested nearly $4 billion across the length of the Oviedo Corridor. But we're not alone. Collectively, this group mobilized over $6 billion in private and public investments. But these aren't just investments in the region. They're investments in all of our future, no matter where you are. Think about it. Critical minerals our world needs. for electric vehicles and semiconductors can be found here. Clean energy we need to power artificial intelligence data centers and economic growth can be built here. Food we need to end hunger can be grown and transported and exported from all across this corridor. Put simply, as all of you know well, nations across the Libido corridor have solutions to some of the world's toughest problems. We just need to keep working together, and I believe this from the bottom of my heart. We work together to mobilize more capital, to build more infrastructure, to help make these solutions real, to help Africa lead the way. I've said to these guys, my colleagues here for a while, the last 2 days, you know, by 2070, the continent of Africa is going to have half the world's population. How can that survive without having the greatest infrastructure? It has to happen. To help Africa lead the way, we need more capital, more infrastructure to deal with these real solutions. That's why we're here today. I want to make sure I get to hear from all of you. So let me close with this. When we talk about PGI, we often talk about the big picture. Investment numbers, rising exports, national prosperity. But it's important to remember, at its core, what we're doing is about our people. I mean, it's simple, about individuals, about our people. That's what this is about. That's why it's about the farmer. We can get more food on more tables. That's what we're doing. The worker who can count on a living wage and safe working conditions. The entrepreneur who is finally empowered to lead, innovate, and build. It matters. It matters. So thank you again for being here today and allowing me to be here. And let's get started getting this done. Back to you, Amos.
Bye.